I'm Missy.
I'm April.
And this is Sheela Na Gig. Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here with us in 2026, a new year. Very exciting. Yes.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned many times now, I think that it is Year of the Horse, so we're very excited about that.
And Missy is just trotting on.
I'm trotting on without a plan. Just like you're supposed to do this year.
Now April's following behind going, wait a minute, slow down, and let's look at least a scheme.
Right. Well, she's good. We're a good balance. We're a good team in that sense. So it's good. But of course, each week we explore our own Sheela Na Gig. To us, that is a woman whose strength, perseverance has led her to greatness, who inspires us. It could be somebody that you've heard of, and then we want to maybe just tell you a little bit more.
Or somebody you've never heard of and should
know more. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're coming from. And we are very excited today because we are going to be talking to an amazing Sheela.
In her own right.
Yep. Yes. And her name is Patti McCracken. And she's also the author of an astonishing book. I'm going to call it Astonishing because...
And not just astonishing, but astonishing.
Astonishing. I'm going to call it an astonishing book. No.
Tell us why.
It truly is. Okay. It is called The Angel Makers, Arsenic, a Midwife, and Modern History's Most Astonishing, there's that word, murder ring, an expertly researched true crime story of women poisoners in the 1920s in Hungary. I love poisoner. As I was doing my work on my computer, it kept correcting poisoner to prisoner. I'm like, no, it's a poisoner. And I love that word, poisoner. So The Angel Makers is a true crime story like no other, a 1920s midwife who may have been the century's most prolific killer, leading a murder ring of women responsible for the deaths of at least 160 men. Now, I do believe there are some very controversial Sheelas out there and also involved in this story. Now, as most of you know, Missy loves controversy. And I love to push the envelope, and I love the controversial Sheelas. I truly do. April,
wait a minute. I don't shy away from controversy, but I think that I'm quicker to say, well, that just is beneath the distinction or dignity of a Sheela.
Yeah. I think I give it a little bit wider. We actually had a Sheela that was a convicted criminal.
Yes.
Yeah. Liz Carmichael.
Yes. And we argued about
we did. We actually argued during
Sheelability.
We did. We argued on her Sheelability during the that particular episode. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, the question to be is, can you be a convicted criminal and still be a Sheela? And I'm going to say yes. I'm going to still say yes.
And I'm going to say maybe. But before we go any further, can we finish talking about our Sheela, Patti?
But I'm working back into that.
Okay.
I'm working back into that
in the scenic route.
Yeah. Okay. April doesn't like the scenic route. We know that. But I'm just easing back into this. So the point being again that, our Sheelas are controversial. And sometimes we have to really open our minds and open our hearts and just hear what's going on, because I do believe that sometimes there's room for women to make bad choices.
Or controversial
choices. Maybe not even bad choices, but controversial choices. And it's important for us to kind of observe this with an open mind, I'm going to say today. So again, we know this is a crime story, and I am also a big crime junkie that most of you know this about me. So I am super excited. I listen to a lot of crime podcasts in addition to a lot of other crime podcasts. So again, controversy, murder, I'm totally in. And I do want to point out that the book list of 2023 put this book as one of their top 10 best true crime books of that year. So that's saying quite a bit about this. And but first, of course, we want to learn a little bit more about author and journalist Patti McCracken. So shall we?
Absolutely. Patti was born in Virginia Beach, Virginia, on October 1964. She is the youngest of 6 children. Wow. And at 15, she moved with her family to Clearwater, Florida. After college, she worked at a news magazine in Washington, D.C. for a decade before moving to Chicago. I was tempted to say where she learned, of course, about true crime. But moving right along, She was an assistant editor at the Chicago Tribune. She eventually relocated to Europe to work as a journalism trainer, free press advocate, which I love and would love to hear more about, and a newsroom consultant for the then emerging democracies of the former Soviet bloc and post-war Bosnia. She was based in an Austrian village near the Slavic border, but her work often included long stints in Eastern and Central Europe, the Balkans, the Croatians, and later North Africa and East Asia. She's twice a Knight International Press Fellow, really impressive. Over 20 years, her articles have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, Wall Street Journal, Guardian, Smithsonian Magazine, and many more outlets.
Wow.
She's a member of the PEN America, and this is her first book, and she is noted as saying it took a very long time to write. So,
yes. So with no further ado, let's dive in here. Yes.
We're thrilled to have you. And
Absolutely. Welcome. And where are you coming to us from today, Patti?
I am coming to you today from a very snowy Martha's Vineyard. So,
Martha's Vineyard. I love that.
Very snowy Martha's Vineyard. So we got hit with the snowstorm that everybody got. So, on our boots and kids on sleds and stuff. So, yeah.
How fun. Snow days. I'm from Michigan and April's from New York.
And I'm from New York.
I do miss the snow days.
And I will mention that today in sunny Southern California, it's almost 80 degrees.
Thank you for mentioning that.
It's so boring. There's something very foreboding about it too. I don't know. Like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop here in LA.
I don't know. I was just glad another dump of snow didn't come because they were saying we could get, more snow. And we're like, please go to Nantucket, go out. And it did because I thought I can't deal with another foot. Boston is like, I think we good. I think we got 2 feet, 3 feet. But, the island is different. We have a different kind of system because of the Gulf Stream. So we don't always get the heavy winter, snow. So it's like, yes, you did make me jealous by saying 80 degrees. So you did very much.
About that?
Yeah. And I'm afraid though that the what's the guy who saw a shadow today? That's called
Puxatawny Phil.
Yes. What is he?
He's a groundhog.
Groundhog. God, my God. So I will say though that the groundhog did see his shadow today, which means that there's extended period of winter. I'm sorry to tell you that, Patti.
We wept. We collectively wept.
Did you weep?
It was heaving sobs. Yes.
Well, he's been wrong before, hasn't he?
He's only correct. This is me.
Yeah.
Of course. He's only correct 35% of the time.
Okay.
You can count on that Staten Island guy. He's 85% of the time. So really you should be like, I think his name is like Staten Island Sam or something. So but he's more reputable for his predictions. This is a perfect example of my brain. I wake up in the morning, I see it's Groundhog Day. What's the history of Groundhog Day? Wait a second. How accurate are his predictions? This is my brain. Again, ADHD, this is what you do. You just go down those little rabbit holes all the time. I drive April crazy.
You also have people, I was in a group this morning and there's an Australian woman and we were talking about Groundhog Day. She said, what are you talking about? Puxatawny Phil. What is this?
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's odd because it just seems like they're so invested in it, right?
Well, I think that Staten Island Sam, you say? I think he needs better PR because this is the first time I've heard of him.
Yeah, I agree. It was the first time I had heard of him. And like here I'm looking up how accurate this guy is. And they're saying, wait, but this guy's way more accurate. Then why aren't we getting our information from him if he's 85%?
Oh, come on. You can't compete with a groundhog. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear about that. Staten Island Sam is a groundhog.
Oh, Missy, April, it's science, okay? It's a groundhog. He knows. If he says it's going to be Facebook, we trust the science of the groundhog. Okay,
you're right.
We ought to tell our producer Taylor that's going to be one of our shirts. Okay, we trust the science, and then we're going to have like the groundhog on the front. Okay, do you got that? Yeah, we're going to be crediting her. You got that?
That's
okay, good.
Well, this has been a riveting conversation. My job is to always steer us back.
Yeah.
So, Patti, you have come up with you've unearthed this incredible story and true crime. And we just want you to dive right in and start to tell us a little bit about what you unearthed and about your own process in the process of unearthing these women.
Okay. I will. So these women, they were known as the angel makers. So everyone says, oh, that's a great title. And I agree, it is a good title. But they were known as the angel makers before I even happened upon the story. And I guess I can start by telling you how I found it. So I'm a journalist, and I was in my little house in my little village in Little Austria. And I was just looking for stories. Stories are everywhere.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. But you have to find one that you just feel connected to. So I don't remember where, but it was in I think it was some British publication, kind of obscure. I still don't remember what it was. But there was a small article about this midwife in this town of Nagyrev, Hungary, and how she was the ringleader of poisoning all these men. And it was written really tongue-in-cheek. It was kind of snarky, kind of. And there was the hook. In journalism, you call the reason you're writing that story then, the news value, is the hook was there was some wax museum or museum going up. And I thought, well, that's really bizarre. Turned out not to be true. It was a totally made up
Is
hook.
that?
Yeah, shame on you, Brits. You're not supposed to make stuff up. But it was about 150 miles from where I was living. And I'm like, I could go check that out. So my neighbor, Harold Laban, was and is a really lovely amateur photographer. And so I went knocking on Harold's door and I said, Harold, do you want to take a road trip? And he's like, yes, let's do it. And so we took a road trip to this village. And I don't know if you've been to Eastern Europe before, or villages in Eastern Europe are very old world villages. You'll have a microwave in the kitchen and you'll still have an outhouse. I mean, it'll just be like they're going to move on to some things and leave some things just, we're not going to bother catching up with indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
And so this was kind of the same way. When I went to this village, it was very much like many I'd been in before. By this time, I'd been in, I don't know, maybe at that point when I first went, I'd been doing this for maybe 12, 13 years, living and working in that area environment. But the first thing we did, I had an interpreter with me that I got arranged beforehand. And we went to the local watering hole, which is another little journalism trick. If you don't know what you're doing, go to the bar. Because
it makes total sense to me.
People like to talk. And really what it boiled, I've told this story many times, but it is exactly how it happened. So we go in there and don't imagine it like a bar. Imagine it an old, I think it was kind of a concrete building, a very bland, very kind of bleak kind of square building, like no personality to it. Maybe dirt floors that had been packed down, as I remember, really heavy benches and chairs thrown around, a few people in there. It was pretty bleak. But the bartender owner guy finally comes over to us. I'm sure he knew why we were there. Looked like we dropped from some other planet. So he avoided us for quite a while, and then he comes over, and then we approached the subject, and he said, I don't want to talk about it. But then he turned around and he said, what do you want to know? And I thought, yeah, I want to know everything, dude. And so that was like, he didn't want to talk about it, but he couldn't help himself from talking about it.
Sure.
So he sent me over to the librarian, which was like, you could reach your arm out and there's the library. And the library is about, a tiny little room, like somebody's bedroom type thing. Not quite that small, but a small one-room place. And there was this my mind, it keeps getting longer and longer. It's like a Wes Anderson film or something. In my mind, it keeps getting longer and longer, the table. But there was a long conference table. And the librarian sat at the top of the table. And she had, I don't know, it was by force of personality, we were all sort of blown to the end of the table. So there was like the librarian at the top, and then Harold and me and the translator were all at the back of it, like, because she wasn't like bombastic or anything, but some people have just an energy that they just have this big energy field.
Yes.
So I'd already done my homework. I'd already interviewed a Canadian historian who had done a thesis on this, a professor. I'd done my homework
cool.
before I went there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see what the locals had to say. So she was talking about things that she knew, and I'm just sort of, checking them off my list. Nothing new that I haven't heard yet. And then the interpreter did this kind of classic signal to me to put her hand up to me to like, I'm gonna have a conversation with her because I need to clarify. That means I need to clarify.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they had this conversation for a little bit, and then she turns to me completely poker face because she's a professional. And she said, she just told me that she is the grand niece of the midwife who was called Auntie Suzie. And I'm saying as poker faced as I can, are
Holy
you sure?
shit.
Are you
Wow.
sure? And she said, yes, I'm sure. That's what I had to clarify. She's the grandniece. And what was profound for me was that it took her about an hour and a half to get there.
Wow.
And that's when I was chasing a kind of a different story after that.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, all right, I'm in a village of about 800 people. Of course, everybody is descended from either a victim or a perpetrator or both.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it's just their grandparents' generation, So
So it wasn't that long ago.
it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Wow.
So the fact that she waited to tell me, it could be that she's just playing a game, but she wasn't. It was just everybody was related or is related, either by cousin or a grandniece or a granddaughter, grandson. So it became at that point, I think I just realized sort of the gravity of it and the weight of it. Maybe actually not at that point. That was the first level of it that I felt, because the midwife was a woman who was named Auntie Suzie. Her name was Suzie Fajikash. If it's English, you'd say Fazikas. And she was called Auntie Suzie. It's not unusual in the villages to call your elders by auntie and uncle, But so she was considered an elder. She was the midwife. And this is interesting. All the midwives, I'd say, of Europe for eons were Sheilas. They were incredible people.
Yes.
Because so Auntie Susie's role, as the midwives were to keep everybody healthy. It wasn't just to deliver babies. It wasn't just to perform abortions when necessary or wanted. They were the family planners. They were birthing the children. They were also healing every possible illness that would come their way. They were almost, like I said of Auntie Suzie, I can walk into a forest and I see trees. Auntie Suzie would walk into a forest and she'd see a pharmacy. She'd see everything that could cure your headache, cure benign tumors, cancerous tumors, everything that is just the medicine that the universe gave us that's in our plants and in our things. She would know everything from one to the other. So she was an expert herbalist. And that was the role of the midwife. They were expert herbalists. So just like all the others, she would take care of the healthcare of the population. She would take care of the healthcare of the animals.
Patti, I don't want to stop you because this is so riveting, but I have to say, isn't it just like a female thing to call her a midwife when she was so much more? She was a medicine woman.
Basically like a homeopathic doctor is what she was.
She was.
Yeah.
A naturalist. Yeah.
Well, what they were called, yes, it's true to leave it to this one thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think actually when I found the story and I was telling my Austrian neighbors about it, they said, "Oh, a wise woman." So
I like that, a wise woman. That's good. Nice.
So that's what they are known traditionally as in old Europe. Midwives were considered wise women. They were also very much like Auntie Suzie, usually not from the community. They usually, like Auntie Suzie was from the Romani community. She was a member of the Roma population. So when they become a midwife, they kind of have special status because they are the healers, but they also practiced a different spirituality. So there was something unknown and something maybe you'd say exotic about them, and maybe a little bit, I don't think that it was scary because these were little villages where everybody knew everybody, but just practiced a different spirituality. Actually, the same spirituality that Hungarians practiced before Christianity came. So she
Okay.
believed in an upper world, a middle world, and a lower world.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
so she would practice, so a type of shamanism. I don't think she did journeys or anything like that, but she had a spiritual thing that I would say that they would come to her when they needed her for fortune telling. They would come to her for counseling and things, just like many midwives of Europe at that time and before.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but this Auntie Suzie had something else going on with her. So she would go up to the local store called Feldmeyer's, which was just like a little, not like a co-op, but a type of little grocery store. And all kinds of things they'd sell, general store, I mean. And she would buy fly paper, and she'd buy it in these big bundles. And she would take it back home, and she would painstakingly distill the arsenic from the fly paper. And don't try this at home because they don't put arsenic on fly paper anymore. And she would just, the chemistry of it would leave just this sort of at the bottom. So at the bottom would be what we know as white arsenic. And
I had no idea. This
yeah,
is fascinating.
yeah. And it's a difficult, not a difficult process, but you have to know how to do it. And it's not like any Joe, not like she went on YouTube to figure it out. So people knew how to do it. Yeah, people knew how to do this. And so she would distill it from the fly paper, and then she would put it in these little vials with the wooden stopper, and she'd pour it. And it was kind of a milky looking solution because it still had the dregs of how the distillation of it. So it was a liquid, and she'd put it and she'd store it away, and she would keep one of these vials in her apron pocket. Because you have to also remember she's a babushka. So she would walk around like a babushka walks around. She'd have this apron and dark clothing. And she would always keep one in her pocket wrapped in white paper. I don't know why she kept it in white paper, but she did. And she would
Where she kept it in her pocket.
because
where are we going with
she'd
this?
go around to her neighbors and she'd say, "Why are you bothering with him? I have a solution." And she quite literally had a solution. She had an elixir with her that she'd say, I can do something for you here.
Wow.
Now, what would be the criteria for her suggesting this? I mean, obviously, the woman is not happy with her husband, but is he abusive? What's going on there?
This is where you get into a range of things. So
Controversy.
Yeah, a range of whys, because why kind of became why not, because they weren't getting caught. They would come to her or she would go to them, but it worked both ways. But they weren't getting caught, which is another kind of aspect we can get into. But the range of things was the fact that, and I said, basically, Auntie Suzie was doing this, but there were other women that were doing this as well in this village, in other villages in Hungary and Austria and France. And this was not, turns out, it's a way to get rid of an unwanted relative.
Wow. So she wasn't the first to do this. There were other people doing it.
No.
I'm sure, though, because of who she was, she probably inspired some other women to do it within her own village.
She might have, as her grandniece said to me, for her it was a business.
So was it part of her practice? That was just one more aspect of how she helped people?
That I'm not sure I could even answer that question. It was, I think I came to understand Auntie Suzie something like, a little bit like Tony Soprano in a way, that she did have a mission, but if her life had been something else, like she was born as a person who was the second class of the lowest class in the country. So
Okay.
she's not only second class because she's a woman, she's then a lower class because she's a peasant, and then a lower class because she's Romany, and then a lower class because she's a female Romany. So she has all of these layers of misogyny and cultural, what have you, pressed upon her. So I would look at her as I always, not always, but as I came to know her through the research on the book, I tended to see her somewhat as a Tony Soprano. She was kind of mafia-like in the way she operated.
It's a great analogy, I have to just say.
She did do it as a business, and she had a pay scale. She had a whole system worked out. She would say, you pay me up front. If I do it, I charge more. If you do it, I just sell you straight up. You give me half at the time, like a payment plan. But I think in certain ways she was an accidental Sheela, and that she was the leader of other Sheilas, like you said, of people who did desperately need her. It wasn't the case in all of the cases I write about in the book, but for most of them it was. I mean, I still shed tears over because they were in desperate situations. And if you have a culture where the first thing you do when you walk in the door and hanging by the front door is an obedience strap, and it's not for the dog, which would be bad enough.
Right.
It's for the wife.
It's terrible.
Wow.
And I suspected there was probably a lot of abuse going on. That would seem the first reason that a woman might want to eliminate her spouse.
A lot of abuse. Yeah, a lot of abuse, and what they didn't necessarily often recognize as abuse. So it's just a way of life that had been passed on through generations,
Sure. And she probably helped them recognize that it was abuse.
You already had a situation of cultural, the abuse, like through that it's okay to abuse women because it's still that way, But you also had World War I, which was sending boys, 18-year-old boys off to fight on the worst front. And coming back, and there's no such thing as PTSD then. They called it shell shock, but they didn't have there's no mental health professionals. There's nothing to help them. And so Auntie Suzie would try to help them with her herbs and such, but you're also locking that violence and that terror into a 2-room house with a young wife and children. And so the level of abuse that women had learned to tolerate because they've been told to learn to tolerate it just escalated exponentially in World War I when these boys were coming back severely damaged. You already have a high level of alcoholism, and then you have even more. So, and the numbers do go up considerably in World War I.
Makes perfect sense.
Considerably, because you also have women who have some peace in their home when their husbands go away. So whether they come back more violent or not, the violence that was sort of just tolerated is gone, and you're like, oh, yeah, I hope my husband survives. But man, this is peaceful without him here. And then he comes back and does more. So a lot of people were seeking her out, but a lot of people weren't seeking her out, and she would do it anyway.
Patty did the ring, or Auntie Suzie, and maybe you don't get into this, but how does she handle issues like, well, if you kill the husband, you may kill off the financial pipeline, and how do you deal with?
In fact, there's one couple in the group. There's one woman, Anna, and I open the story. This is all true, but I wrote it. It's not novelized version. I wrote it as if it were a novel, but there's a reason it took 12 years to write this book, because there's a lot of research, and you have to do that to write it so you know everything.
Sure.
And present it like a docudrama instead of a documentary. So Anna starts out the book, and Anna is married to Louis, who is the classic town drunk, and he's just, nobody had anything nice to say about Louis. I mean, because he was wretched, but he was also Anna's only source of income. So they ran the local bar, but she ran the local bar, and he drained it of everything, but it was their only income. They had no farm, they had no nothing. And so if Auntie Suzie killed him, two things would happen. She would eliminate her favorite watering hole, And then Anna wouldn't have any support for her children. So she didn't kill Louis, but she did kill others. So there were certain situations where there was no financial hold. You got to be careful if you're going to eliminate.
You're saying
someone,
that
you got to be sure that
I'm sorry, you're saying that she often like took things into her own hands. Like this person doesn't necessarily want to kill their husband, but this guy is wretched and he should be killed. So I'm going to take care of the situation.
In that situation, she did insert herself into Anna's life much more than Anna wanted.
Okay.
And everybody has asked, why didn't she kill Louis? And the reason she didn't kill Louis, I believe, is that women weren't allowed to own property and things. So because we're women,
yes,
we are property.
Exactly.
So the bar would have gone to his brother, and what would have happened to Anna, we don't know. What would have happened? She would have been out on the street. She was not a landowner in any way. And so not killing him, even though he was wretched and horrible, and Anna would have been better off without him in her life, the best thing to do, the least worst circumstance, was to keep him alive, because she would have had no way to support her 2 children.
Okay, so then she was somewhat conscientious, you're saying, in situations where she realized that, they would put the woman in a bad position.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
She often did take advantage of people, and her personality sort of changed as she got older, as she got away with more. But I do think she did. I've wrestled with the fact that, is she amoral? Is she immoral? I think she was more amoral. She had some morality that I think she started with, but she had a lot of power in that village. And I think the main thing category she falls under as a Sheela is, even if she's an accidental Sheela, she did offer some alternatives to women that they would not have otherwise had. And she was like an umbrella for them, because there were other women in this village doing this. But if you don't know people are doing it very secretly. So if you don't know anybody and you can't go get out, you can go to Auntie Susie's kitchen door. Everybody knew they could go to Auntie Susie's kitchen door. Every woman knew.
Wow. It reminds me a little bit of the Gulabi gang that April did an episode about it in India. And you're familiar with the Gulabi gang?
I am, because when the book first came out, a group of women in India asked me to talk to their book club, and they didn't necessarily tell me about the Gulabi gang, but they told me about what was going on in these villages.
Yeah.
Modern day.
I'm similar. And I don't think a lot of them, I don't think there was so much murdering going on as there was just a lot of physical. They would burn them. These women would beat these guys up. Yeah.
Women would beat the guys up, but Indian women get burned today.
Yes.
They get burned alive. I mean, it's
it's horrific. It's horrific what they endure still. It's horrific.
It's going on today. Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
Well, there is a woman, so I did spend a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and I was in Moldova, which is a small country between Ukraine and Romania. And I was there for about 5 months. And I remember one woman saying to me, my husband, he's a good husband. He doesn't beat me.
Wow. That's so sad.
And these are modern women like you and I.
Right.
These are women with careers and dreams, but the expectations are quite different.
Wow.
Yes.
Pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
Patty, maybe I'm jumping ahead. I have a tendency to do that. But why do you think Auntie Suzie never got caught?
Well, you do have to read the book for that.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Okay, and we don't want any spoiler alerts because we're looking forward to reading it.
And the other thing I'll mention, I read a lot of the reviews, and everybody said you can't put it down. That you start reading it and it is impossible to put down. So that's my kind of book too. It sounds riveting.
Well, the term angel maker actually is an old, the anglicized version of a German word, which sounds the same, Engelmacher, which is a word for an abortionist. And I will say that I will say that when she does get brought up on abortion charges at some point, and she thinks that she's getting, caught for something else.
Okay.
So when she goes in for questioning and she realizes what they're there for, she's like, oh God, are you kidding me? And so she's like, yeah, I'm an abortionist, and you better be glad I'm an abortionist, because without me, what would be happening to these women? And so she very, very strongly believed in her role as a midwife and that aspect of
Yeah.
her role as a midwife.
Sure.
And that can also go for the Sheilas, the midwives of Europe, because she was like, yes, this is what I do for the women of this community. This is what I do for the families of this community. This is what we've done for thousands of years. You want to put me in jail for this? I dare you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she was quite adamant that what she was doing was a service that was needed. And I don't personally think she was wrong about that. Because otherwise, what do? You've got these poor peasant villages and no way to raise these children, and you've got husbands who are demanding whatever they want when they want it. And so, okay. Right.
So did these angel makers work at all together, or were they all working very separately and independently?
They worked together in the sense that they kept it hush hush. So this happened over quite a long period of time, but my book follows the span. I think Auntie Susie's first thing started probably in 1910, 1911, and went on up through 1929. So it's and who knows when it really started. I mean, it might have started with her parents and her grandma. This is not something that they thought, oh, we've got this great new idea. The French call arsenic inheritance powder. So this is some history of this going on in Europe.
Repeat that one more time. Repeat the inheritance powder.
The French call arsenic inheritance powder.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Which could be the male gaze on that. That could be the male gaze, because you would be looking at it as these are women tended to use arsenic to get rid of abusive husbands and such. But in fact, they're saying inheritance powder, and we might call it something else, that it's not just for inheritance, it's for I need a place to live, and I need to be able to live, but without this guy. And by the way, I'm not against men, but I am against abusive men in a culture.
Absolutely. We agree. We agree. Yeah. There's plenty of support bros out there, as we call them.
Yeah. But it was interesting when I went in to do this story, because I first started it as just an article. I had no intention of writing a book. I had no idea how to write a book. Yeah.
Okay.
And I wrote this article and I thought, okay, that's done. And then I kept finding myself bringing this up at parties, and I'd go to Vienna, I'd go wherever.
Absolutely.
Years later, I'm still talking about it. And so I thought, something's unfinished about this. We have this saying in what used to be newspapers, but in the media business, when you finish your story or you put the newspaper out, we call it putting the baby to bed. So if you have to stay till the Bulldog edition comes out, or whatever, the first edition of the newspaper comes out, you'd say, I have to put the baby to bed tonight. I'll be home late,
Love that.
You put the story to bed. My baby kept getting up. It's like,
there's
something else here. It feels like this just unfinished.
Right.
And so I, wrote a book proposal, and I did get an agent. And then with a nonfiction book, you haven't written the story yet. You've sold it basically only on your idea for it. So I sold my book to one of the big 5 publishers, which was fantastic for about 15 minutes. And then you're like, oh my God, I got to write. Oh my God, I don't know how to write a book.
Do it.
What am I going to do? I don't have any idea. I wrote like 1,500 words on this 7 years ago. But when I first started digging into once I caught my breath and calmed myself down and, I started digging into everything, and I hired a couple of people to help out with translations of things. And I thought, that's interesting. These women were maligned in the press. Now, Auntie Susie didn't quite make it that far, but when these women went to trial, they were called, and I quote, dissolute sluts and bitches. That was
Mm.
what they were called in the press.
Wow.
Horrible things were said about all of these women.
Mhm.
And some of them weren't even, I'm convinced, weren't even guilty, but they got all swept up in this whole dragnet that came through.
Like a witch hunt. Yes.
It
Yes.
was
And
very much like that. Yeah. Yeah, very much like that. Absolutely.
yeah. And when did they go to trial, and what were the circumstances that they were brought to trial?
If we're not into spoiler alert.
Yes.
No, well, it was essentially a bunch of anonymous notes that had been ignored for a long time, finally came to light. And when they did, and when another murder was attempted in another neighbor village where Susie's cousin was also operating, it was sort of like Keystone Cops. They couldn't, tripping over themselves to get to the village and set everything up. And reporters came in from, that was the investigation, which went on for a few months and went on much like it would here.
Sure.
You just try to get a confession out of somebody. And really, the ones they got a confession out of were the ones they could convict. If they didn't get a confession, they had to let them go, it turns out. And the prosecutor was a man I came to really respect. He's an amazing man. I don't always agree with what he found, but I do. I think he was just absolutely stunned by what was happening. And he was a pretty humane man when it came down to it.
Yeah. And what year was this about?
So the trials, everything came to light in 1929.
1929. Okay.
And the trials were grouped in groups of 4 women. I can't remember if there was that exactly, but it was 66 women were indicted, 29 women were finally charged, and 16 women were convicted.
Wow.
And 3 were given the death penalty.
Mm.
In fact, the first one who was hanged was the first woman to be hanged in Hungary in 80 years. This is a
Wow.
big deal for Hungary. This is a
I
huge,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Wow. And you say Susie started around like 1910, 1911, whatever, and then just kind of went in through the 20s, and the trial didn't happen until 1929. Overall, 160 men, I think it is what I had read.
Yeah.
At what point, I mean, I'm sure they were kind of suspicious, right? Were there suspicions all along? And I mean, obviously, I'm also thinking some of these men must have been pretty young just to drop dead, right?
Yeah, you're right. Some of them were young, and some of them were actually pretty tragic. So it doesn't really, were kind of, yeah, some of them were young, but I will say the prosecutor felt very confident that he could dig up 162 bodies, I think, as they found the arsenic, and he was convinced that he could get all those women tried. But the court wisely put a stop to it and said, gosh, why are we going to do this when even the perpetrator's dead at this point, or it's been more than 20 years, So he felt for sure 162, and he felt it was actually went into the hundreds, into 300 or so. Yeah.
Arsenic is a terrible way to go, from what I understand.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not fun. But there was so many that were dying. There was one situation where this dude was walking down the street one day, and all his buddies, like, he's just walking down the road, and all his buddies are walking up, and they're like, come at him from the opposite direction. And they're like, I'll use an American name, like, Alexander, what are you doing here? And he's like, what are you doing? He goes, we're on our way to your funeral.
Oh.
So many people were dying that they were getting mixed up as to who was dying.
Wow.
But now part of that can be blamed on a lot of people having the same names and them getting confused. But then the other part of that is there were so many that were dropping.
Wow.
Yes. But you have to imagine some of this is just the hubris of men, is that they couldn't think, my wife wouldn't do that, So what basically happened is yes, they were starting to be suspicious. Susie gets brought up on abortion charges and actually gets convicted and sent to prison.
Oh, wow.
And for some reason, she was acquitted by the higher court, which I could never, ever find why. There's no logical reason why, because she actually confessed. She confessed. And then so I don't know how. So
maybe they understood the wisdom of her defense.
Maybe they did. Maybe they were like, come on, this is actually, But
Angel of mercy.
yes, right. But these people, when she comes back, her neighbors were like, they already knew she was kind of like a wise woman, so that they already knew that she dealt in some things that they weren't too sure about. Not that they just didn't understand with her spiritual nature and how she used the spirit world. And so they thought only she must have used her magic to get acquitted after she'd already confessed and been sent to prison.
Oh, that's funny.
So
Yes,
they felt she had more power when she came back into the village. So they were kind of a little freaked out by her. So they would kind of maybe go to the other side of the street for a little while because they were like, we don't know what kind of magic you worked up in Budapest, but things are happening here. So,
But she was done with her killing ways at that point?
no, she got bolder.
Oh.
She got quite a bit bolder. So I
Okay,
think
let's talk about that.
She just went after it like really strongly. Yeah.
You said that as time went on, she became more assertive, more emboldened. Yeah.
Nobody's around. So they were supposed to have 2 police officers, or what they would call gendarmes, in every village in the country. And this village was extremely remote and had been made more remote when 50 years before Susie came, they regulated the river. So it was almost like a noose around the neck of the village, disconnecting it from the rest of the country. So to get there, even when I was going there, to go 25 miles from Solnok, which is the main town, to Nagarev was an hour and a half to go 25 miles. Deep, rutted roads. And they were just like the same old wagon track roads practically.
It kind of sounds like Los Angeles, actually.
It might be. It might be like Martha's Vineyard. We have deep rutted roads, all dirt roads. So it was really disconnected. So getting any police there was not, I guess they felt like it's too far out. You can't get any, what are you going to do? And they still don't have any police in the village. So nobody's there to check anything, and nobody cares what women say. So all these anonymous notes, who, interestingly, I didn't see any evidence of any fingers being pointed directly to Auntie Suzie. I could see her sister. I could see all these other things. But people were writing anonymous notes and saying, check out what Sarah is doing. Check out what Lydia is doing. And they were sending it to the town clerk. The town clerk happened to kind of fancy Auntie Suzie a lot. He liked her a lot. And he also thought, women. And he also thought that of the peasants as well, because he was, they're just always complaining about everything, So they didn't take, the women who were calling each other out weren't taking it seriously. And the men were just going, as long as it doesn't happen to me, kind of putting their heads in the sand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. It's just a fascinating story. I can't believe that I hadn't heard about it before. I can understand your total fascination with this. Going back to what you said about her sparing the life of the one husband because she knew that it would put the woman in financial difficulty. What was a circumstance where a woman wouldn't be in financial difficulty should she lose her husband during those times?
Well, you could have situations where if her parents were still alive, I mean, I'm guessing here, but if her parents were still alive, she'd have some recourse,
Sure.
Or just if the property could be left, because you could leave, a woman couldn't own and run a business at that time.
Sure.
So most women were farmers' wives. And so when they died, they would still be tending land that didn't belong to them anyway. These were tenant farmers. So they didn't own the land usually.
But they could work the land.
So they could still work the land and get the money for it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. In Auntie Suzie, in Anna's case, it was really a case of owning this business. And she was not allowed to be a business owner in that sense at that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
She would have been in dire straits. Poor Anna. I feel bad.
No, thank you for clarifying that because I was curious about that. I'm blown away.
Oh, I know.
I'm blown away. And again, these are what we call controversial Sheilas because I'm sorry, but some of these dudes probably deserve to die. I don't know. Does anybody deserve to die? I don't know. I don't want to play God. I certainly would not want to be in Aunt Susie's shoes. I would never want to play God. But there has to be some recourse if you are completely in an abusive relationship.
Well, I think another way also to look at it is a matter of practicality.
Yeah.
And it sounds
That's so coarse, April. Wow.
But I think you're right. It was a matter of practicality. I mean, you look at, there's one couple who just broke my heart. It was Christina and her husband. And by all accounts, they were very much in love when they married. I get emotional. They met when they were 17. They were in love. We've all been in love. They were just in love. Life is beautiful. And he was a very proud, like a carpenter, but he learned the trade of joiner. So he would make doors and door frames and stuff. And he was quite proud, and you imagine it's like he's got his tools and he's making these stuff and he's got this lovely new wife. And I think everybody had a drinking problem, women and men. There was just way too much alcohol. But it just seemed that the war just brutalized him. I mean, the war turned him into a completely different man. And so when he came back, she had 2 little children. What's she going to do? There was one time when he was firing a rifle at her as she's fleeing with her 10-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter out of the house and ran to a neighbor's house. So what do you do?
What do you do?
There's
It's
no
true.
shelter to go to. There's no police to be called. I mean, Christina just breaks my heart because I don't actually think Christina did I don't think Christina killed her husband, but
Do you think, in other words, that was Aunt Susie's idea or another midwife's idea?
it was Auntie Suzie. She did go to Auntie Suzie.
Okay.
She did go to Auntie Suzie seeking help.
Hmm.
But no, this is splitting hairs. But she was complicit. But she confessed only after being in solitary confinement for a month. And then as soon as she got out of solitary confinement, as soon as she confessed, she switched her confession. I just think they pressured her to confess. But I think she was complicit, but I don't think she did the deed, which was by the law was a different category of what she was punished for. She didn't get sentenced to death, but I've always felt terribly bad for her because I don't know. There was something.
Well, that has to be really hard. The person that you fall in love with and that you marry and you have your children with is a very different person than the man who comes back from the war,
and he comes back from a harrowing situation. I mean, I think that the complexity of all of this makes it not so. It's impossible to see it as black or white or good or bad.
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah. And I would imagine, tell me about the parents of some of these men, because that must have been really difficult too. And I'm sure maybe some of those parents, I mean, I would certainly be suspicious if my young son suddenly dropped dead.
Well, this is interesting because no one's ever asked that question. And I have to say, I've never pondered that question of what the parents felt.
Oh.
Funny. I always wondered about the children because Auntie Susie's grandniece, who I met, the librarian, she made a comment about looking through the information that we both knew was available at the time. Well, it was accurate. It just was limited. But she said, oh, yeah, my husband, it wasn't her husband, it was the guy she was living with, but she's like, my husband, my partner. She always wondered how her mother-in-law was orphaned. And it turned out she was orphaned because her mom went to jail for killing her husband. But it was kind of interesting with how she was so passively taking in this information and so sort of, not
the dawning.
Yeah, and it didn't dawn on her. It was just like, oh, okay, and turn the page. And that was fascinating to me that it's just such a almost like it's through a fog of, you can't feel the emotion. There's just this foggy wall keeping.
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, the town's reaction when you were investigating. And I kind of want to circle back to you. You start out, you're just going to write an article. And it became a long project and maybe a little bit of an obsession. Can you talk a little bit about what happened to you in the process of creating this book?
I came out on the other side a different person, for sure.
Wow.
I would say on one hand, because of me, I'm not always somebody, I'm somebody who, like, when you take on something like that, you're like, what caused me to do this? I don't know about you. I am on one hand confident, and on the other hand, unconfident of this and this. And so it brought out my shadow side, my dualistic side. I can do it, I can't do it. I can do it, I can't do it. But in terms of the book itself, I think the way it has been written has been a source of controversy for some. I stand by it. I understand what they're saying, but I don't think I stand. I absolutely stand by it. I felt that the book, and I feel it now even more strongly, that the book had to be written as if it were a novel, because I had to get at some emotional questions that you can't get at when you're just stating the facts. And they weren't here to interview. So I kind of had to call on them.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of do as much as I could as I told my assistant, Attila, aptly named Attila, I said, I need to recreate the DNA of this story. So, and when I told him that, and he said, oh yeah, Patricia, so you need to know what films were playing at the cinema. And I said, yes, I need to know everything, that I can recreate this so I can bring us all back into this time so we can see these situations, that it's not just black and white.
Sure.
Because it's not fair to this isn't some maniac serial killer on the loose.
No.
There's a reason somebody figured out how to distill arsenic from flypaper. So I do think it's particularly different if you have children in the household.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got to protect them, and you've got to make sure they stay alive, and you have to stay alive so that they can be brought up in a way that you feel is the best of the situation. So, I mean, you can't advocate for it, but you can't advocate against it either.
It's a helpless situation.
Yeah.
It's a helpless situation. So,
You've
yeah.
got nobody there to help you. Even if police were there, would they have believed the women? Because they go home and beat their wives.
Good point.
Good point. Yeah.
How are they saying it's so bad? It's not that bad. It happened to my mom. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I started out working on this story, I think it was just exciting because it's an interesting story. And I felt like a detective pulling all the pieces together, and it was hard to pull all together because nobody had ever done it before. And that was another thing that was exciting about it.
Yeah.
But then
Yes.
there comes turning points when you see death records, and you see, because there were cases of infanticide that is wrapped into this story as well, which makes it more complicated. And the infanticide really turns out abortions that didn't take, and it's horrible. It's horrible. But when you go through the records and you're actually holding a piece of paper that represents somebody's life that was ended shortly, that's enormous.
Yes, it is.
But when I had this dream once, I had lots of dreams about this story as I was doing it, but I once had this dream. It was just a little snippet where my mother, who had not yet, she was still in this world, but my grandmother and my mother, so the 3 generations of women for that. So my grandmother, my mother, and me. My grandmother and my mother were standing on the other side of an old kind of screen door. I grew up in the South, so screen doors and the big W for the welcomes. Do you remember that? The little iron?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I do.
I always thought it meant Wilson because it was my friend Liz Wilson. But anyway, my mom and my grandmother were standing on the other side, and I could see sort of this halo of women that were behind them. And it was so powerful because I woke up with the feeling that this is a generational story. And it felt like they were on the other side of the screen. I was on one side of the screen. I could tell the story, and they couldn't tell the story. And it felt I felt the honor of writing this story at that point. So whether or not I can call Auntie Suzie a hero, she's more of an anti-hero. Maybe is an accidental Sheena. I don't know, but all of these women are wrapped up in her story, just karmically or otherwise. They became part of her story. And I think I felt like that it's almost like this needs to be told, because I guess you could say it is setting the record straight, but it needs their souls must have had the burden. And I wasn't thinking about this before while I was I didn't have any mission but to tell the story.
Sure.
But as you're telling the story, I am back in Najdov. I am there. I am watching the horses clip-clop down the country lanes and stuff. So I feel like I had, because of the level of reporting that I did and research that I did, that I gave myself eyewitness to it as if I were there, because I had to kind of reconstruct everything. But this is still...
Which is why it's so compelling and hard to put down. I'm sure that's a big part of that.
Well, I did my best, and people have asked me how I feel about Auntie Suzie, and I just don't have an answer to that question. I can say she was very intelligent. Again, had she been born into different circumstances, what would she have done? I don't know. I'm not sure she's somebody I would have wanted to know, but she had her own shadows. She had her own shadows.
Yes.
She had a lot of fear. And she had a lot of obsession with money and obsession with some power. She wasn't so obsessed with power. She just wanted to make sure she needed to keep her family close. And yeah, she was fearful of losing what she had already gained. And she was willing to do anything to keep it. And
that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. I mean, I like that you called her an accidental Sheela. I think that's a good way to describe her, an accidental Sheela, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about just the end of her life? Like, what was her life like by the time she died? What had become of her?
Well, we talked about when she came back from being acquitted from the abortion charges, and she was like, nothing can stop me now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that kind of, she started to unravel. I don't think ravel is a word, but she would unravel a little. She would have these little, she started to unravel, and that sort of unraveling would get wider with each sort of episode. So she, like one time she came upon the doctor's car, and the doctor was the one who sort of called her in for the abortion stuff. He's the one who started that ball rolling. She sees his horse and cart, and she just hauls off, screams, hurling, and spits into the cart. And this is all stuff. I don't make any of this stuff. This is all documented.
Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Because people are in the book there. Did she make that up? I'm like, no. But that's an unreasonable thing for a woman to do, or anybody to do, when they're walking down the street and they see so. So she would just get these kind of into these fits and these rages that became, and then she would tighten back up again. For all the listeners, toot 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 means sort of like, I imagine like a Looney Tunes cartoon where the whirling dervish kind of comes apart and comes back together again. And so, but she would unravel in more and more often in the last few years. So I think that's what happened to her. You have to read the book to find out what really happened.
Okay, let's read the book to find out.
We have to read the book, period.
Period. You're right.
There's no way to come away from this conversation and not read the book.
And I think all of our listeners will feel the same way. I'm sure you will. I am absolutely fascinated by this conversation, by this book, and this topic, and this accidental Sheela.
This accidental Sheela.
Yes.
The book is called Arsenic, Midwife and Modern History's Most Astonishing Murder Ring by Patti McCracken.
Yay.
The title is The Angel Makers. Yeah.
Angel Makers. And that's sort of The Angel Makers, Arsenic, a Midwife and Modern History's Most Astonishing Murder Ring.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. And my goodness. Well, one thing I will say for sure, you are our Sheela, because you went down a very, very deep rabbit hole. And I feel that in the spirit of journalism, you did it without bias.
Yes. Very admirable.
You really tried to report the facts, and I'm studying a bit of creative nonfiction, and there is a bit of a controversy when we take creative license with facts, but obviously you've produced something that that is highly, highly readable. And I just want to add, with a lot of integrity, because you didn't take a side and you just really stuck to your journalism roots.
I did. And I didn't do anything creative with the facts. So what I would do, for example, like there's a scene in there, there's a puppy scene, and it's difficult, but people are like, why would she, why did she put that in there? It wasn't necessary, to make stuff up. And it's like, I didn't make up the puppy scene. I didn't make up any of those scenes. So I would do it, for example, when I needed to, like, there's a scene where Auntie Suzie is in the pub and a man named Michael is in the pub and he's celebrating his birthday. What I knew was that Susie would go to the pub every day. And I knew that Michael would go to the pub every day and that Michael was likely to have celebrated his birthday at that time. What I don't know is maybe Susie was sick that day, or maybe Michael had business in Budapest and didn't go. So I did allow for some license so that they could be in the same room at the same time, so I could let people know that they knew each other and they had a history together. Those were the types of scenes that I would create that I didn't know actually happened, but no action actually happens.
Okay.
By the scenes that I manifested where no action actually happened. It was just a scene where I had to make this scene because they needed to show that they know each other. So those were the types of things. I wouldn't do anything with sort of the facts of the case. If there was anything I found that said that Michael had been in Budapest on his birthday, that there's no way I would have, said, well, I'll just put him in there. I would have maybe had her at the pub and maybe we're thinking about Michael in Budapest and what he's normally here on his birthday. So those are very rarely did I do that, but journalists have taken issue with the fact that I allowed myself to get in their heads. And I did, because I couldn't interview them. So I did have to imagine what that would be like.
Good.
But I did have a lot of information from the trial archives, and I did hire some English teachers to go get all the research that we could get. And
That's great.
I looked for every manner of historian. There's actually a historian about historians love to have you talk to them because they've devoted their entire life on the folk costumes of this part of Hungary. They're like,
Sure.
So
That's great.
that was kind of fun. But yeah, I think one of the difficult things about writing this book was it was depressing. I was trying to stay away from that word, but it's dark,
Yeah.
It is dark.
Yeah.
And there was some delays in it because it did take me a lot longer than my publisher wanted me to take. And I got dropped from my first publisher, and then I got a second one. And then there was COVID, and then, things happened. So there were all these delays, but I can't remember where I was going with that. But it was interesting because when it would have come out and when it did come out, the world has changed a lot since then, as we know. So it's unfortunately more relevant when it came out in 2023 than it was supposed to be when it's supposed to come out 10 years before. I think something like that.
Happened for a reason.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And it's very interesting how when I was doing the circuit, and even now, I actually had heard of a confession of one of the women who was talking about my book. She was an elderly Black woman who said, yep, I tried to do that to my husband. And
She actually said that to you?
she said it to somebody, my friend who was next to her, who told me about it.
Wow.
Her 7-year-old son was sleeping with a knife under his bed. And
That's heartbreaking. That is
what do
heartbreaking.
you do? So, of course, she didn't go through with it, but she was like, I need to do something because
Right.
my violent husband is now scaring the heck out of my 7-year-old child.
Oh, God.
So, I know, but so the Sheilas in the world are going to turn this around.
Yes.
We're going to turn this around. We're not going to stand for this anymore.
No, we're
Yeah.
not.
I even see it, and I don't know about you guys, but it's interesting to see these other generations coming up and what they don't tolerate. And it's
Right.
interesting to see what they over tolerate as well. And certain things, I
Sure.
think of the millennial women, or
Mhm.
maybe women slightly younger than me who tolerate from things. This is completely off topics, but I was one of a few American journalists who were leading a group of American students in Nice, in France, several years ago. And there was this one student, she maybe 19, I guess, 20. And this older guy was talking to her in such a way. And I can't remember what he said, but I remember how I would have reacted and how my instinct was to react and how she reacted. And she was like,
Mm.
And I was on one hand shamed for myself that I'm like, that wasn't my knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
But good for her and good for her mama, whoever taught her to do that, because it was like, oh, you know how you always get, oh, it's okay. You know,
Yeah, I just have to be polite. We have to just be polite. We're taught to be
everybody has
polite.
to get along,
Yeah.
and we're good girls, and ha ha ha, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not to the point of Susie, but it is to the point of this misogyny and this treating women like objects or cute little girls or cute little things,
Mm-hmm.
and not treating us as fellow humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think some things are changing for the better in that, and that they're not tolerating it, and it's kind of knee-jerk for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
we have to go, what? So yeah. And I was very happy. I have to say, one of the things that I was so satisfying after everything was said and done was to get the male gaze off of this, and let's tell the story as it happened. And you know, I think some people are walking away and going, I don't know how I feel, but I know I'm still thinking about it.
Good point.
Yes.
I was very surprised about how many people are saying, go, Susie, because I didn't feel that way. I don't, like I said, I don't know how I feel about Auntie Suzie. I still
It probably has a lot to do with your personal experience too. Obviously, that woman who said that she had thought about killing her own husband with her 7-year-old son, you know, she's been there.
Right.
That's she's
right.
had to
You are right.
contemplate, because it's really, when a situation like that, it's either him or you.
Right.
That's kind of what it boils down to. And if you're a mother and you have a child, you need to be there for your child. So the choice then would be him. I mean,
That's right.
I see it. And like I said, everyone's coming to it with a different perspective. And I think that definitely has something to do with it.
Well, I was very surprised, because when you're writing the book, you're not thinking, you hope it gets well received, but you don't imagine the intricacies of how it's received. You just want it to be well received.
Sure.
And so I wasn't imagining the ways in which women would come to me and feel like Auntie Suzie was their hero. And I also find it interesting that of all the interviews I did a whole slew of them. It's been out for 2 years. So the first year I did a whole slew. There was only one male interview that interviewed me like the women did. I found that interesting. He asked the questions that a lot of the women asked. All the rest were like, how'd they get away with it for so long? And how'd they do it? And didn't the men know? How could the men not know, you know? And they were all like so curious more about how did they get away with it? How did they get away with it? Not why did they do it? How
Interesting.
Super interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
Right
very
down the line.
telling.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
right down the
Yeah.
line. So why didn't anybody stop them? And it's like, well, you know, here's why.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. That's yeah.
I never expected that at all.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, it opens up so many conversations, obviously. And we would love to hear from our listeners. We want to know your opinion. We'd love to hear what you think, and, you know, any questions you have too for Patti. We would, you know, we welcome those. We always welcome the conversation. And I feel like an interview like this and a book like this really welcomes conversation.
Yes. And please read the book.
And please read the book as
take
well.
My own good advice.
Yeah, I'm going to take my own good advice too.
Yeah.
I'm going to read that book. But we are so just honored and delighted to have spent this wonderful time with you. This wonderful time. Maybe that's a bad choice of word. It has been wonderful in a lot of ways.
I think it's been really.
No, yes. Again, see, it makes you think like, what? No, it has been wonderful. And you're a Sheela. You are a Sheela. And I'm, yeah.
And we thank you for really bringing this woman, Auntie Suzie, and the whole history and controversy and complexity to life.
Yes. And as we like to say in the Sheela Na Gig podcast, thank you for fighting the fight and shining the light.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
Right.
That's
Oh,
what you're doing
that. I love that.
every day.
Well,
Yep.
if people
Yep.
want to find out more, and there's some backstories I've written about, little things about how I got the story or little things about this and that, they can go to my website, PattiMcCracken.com.
Will you please spell that for us, Patty?
Yeah, it's PattiMcCracken.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's little tidbits about things that are sort of ancillary.
I know where I'm headed on my phone tonight when I go to bed.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been great. We really appreciate your time and sharing such an interesting and controversial and astonishing story with us.
That's going to stay with us.
It is. And our accidental Sheela.
Yeah,
Yes.
our accidental Auntie Suzie. All right.
Thank
Thank you so
Love
much.
it. Love it. Thank you, Patty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Unabashed in your glory.